And I just got recognized by my professional group as a technical person or leader in the field. So I was really happy with that. That just happened yesterday.
What group is that?
Super neat.
It's called the Institute of Packaging Professionals, IOPP.
Isn't packaging in some sense the largest industry on the planet? Like everything gets packaged
Yeah.
multiple times
I think
before
that's
it.
the sex industry, Jeff.
Actually,
No,
no,
that's the most
packaging
popular.
is over that.
We do more packaging than sex? I don't know.
Well, you have to, if depending upon the kind of sex you're talking about,
Go on,
if
Jan.
it's
It's all about packaging. It's all about packaging.
It could be things have to be packaged up to send to you. I actually got
That's
involved in a nutraceutical that was called XY foreplay, which was sort of interesting.
We just can't get off it.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
Now, let's change the subject quickly and welcome back into the fold, Mache. It's been a long time. Why don't you say hi? Kick off you there.
Hey everybody, how's it going? It has been a while. Excited
What's the
to.
latest with you?
Oh, just busy as can be.
You're still elemental.
Still at Element. Yep. Everyone's decided that R&D is back in full swing and it needs all their stuff done yesterday. So we're as busy as we've ever been and trying to get it all done.
It happens with packaging too. They always want it yesterday when it takes 6 weeks to get the stuff. So
You think about it late. You think about
yes.
the day you're ready to ship your order. Like, damn, I don't have a box.
Well, and it's more to it than just a box. Do you know that
Right.
box is going to survive and your product is going to survive? So makes it sort of fun. I have a little set of slides that I can go through and show you a few things. I go fast on these slides. I just pulled them from other things that I work on. So hopefully you'll find them interesting.
We start to peel some folks off while I'm doing that. Luke, it's been a while since we've heard from you anyhow. You want to say hi? Come on, man, say hi. Don't be like that.
Okay, good morning.
Very accommodating, thank you. Maya, give us an update. What's going on with your dad on the other side of the pond?
Well, let's see. He's still, yeah, I guess busy as can be. Not traveling quite as much as, well, obviously with these times. But yeah, he's doing great. He's got some lasers in the works, and
Lasers.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, he's doing well.
Thanks. Okay, Ms. Gates, if you want to fire up your slides, unless anyone else wants to raise their hand and offer something, we'll commence. Oops. What happened? Everything disappeared there for a moment.
So are you seeing my slide?
Yep.
And not just that it was things around there.
Okay.
Now, I will say that this title does seem like a bit of a softball for someone who is a career packaging engineer. Basically, the question is, am I important or irrelevant? And I'm going to go with important.
Of course. But a lot of people don't understand what packaging engineers can or are trained to do. So they don't consider them as something that they really need. So, and this on your title thing actually captured more points than anything else I could come up with. So
The young lady is referring to a kind of an app I use called it's CoSchedule, and it's a headline analyzer. And this was the title that scored highest in terms of what would get clicks if it were like a blog post or something garnering interest. So all you wannabe marketers out there, hit me up for that.
it works pretty good.
That's
I
great.
just thought I could show you a little bit of what I've done.
Okay.
So I've got over 35 years in medical devices, and I also worked in foods, pharmaceuticals, and detergents. Detergents were a lot of fun for high-speed production until I realized how allergic I was to all the perfumes they had. So I've worked on a few of these other things. I work in with this IOPP group, which is, we call it SoCal IOPP for the chapter that's here. We also have a medical device packaging technical committee. Say that quickly many times or a few times and your tongue will get tied up. We are actually working on revising the package engineering handbook for medical device people right now. So we're working on trying to revise that. It's 20 years old, so it's a little out of date. And it's a whole bunch of us are taking a chapter to write up and put in there. Then I work with ASTM FO2, which is a flexible packaging, flexible barrier packaging group. And I also work with D10, which is more on the environmental and rigid packaging. So we actually develop test methods and ways of shipping things and how you can test it and make sure things don't fail. Recently, I've gotten into ISO standards, which it's more political than I thought it would be, but it's interesting to see how the different countries work through all that. And for those of you that are women out there, I actually did raise 2 children that are very successful out in the field right now and enjoying themselves, making more money than I ever did. So that's sort of nice. So what does a packaging engineer do? We do a lot with design inputs and outputs, which is a lot of R&D. We try and figure out how to do our risk assessments, material selection. We have to know a little bit about statistics so we can have statistical sampling, because that's a requirement by law for pharmaceutical and medical devices. Human factor test setups. Some people actually go into that as a career and only work with the human factors because the packaging is included with whatever you're doing with pharmaceuticals and medical devices to make sure people can actually use them. And that's dependent upon the age group too. So you'll have different requirements for an older age group than you might have with children. And we work a lot in distribution, making sure we understand shock and vibration for trucks, cars, rail cars, whatever we're working with. There's some really good information out even on helicopters. I've worked with the military where they've had to parachute in supplies on a pallet, and we had to make sure the shock wouldn't break the equipment and materials that are there. We've also gotten into being called sterile barrier system engineers because we need to make sure that something stays sterile. That's what's nice with terminally sterilized medical devices. As long as the validation is done right with the sterilized product, you just have to make sure the holes stay out of the package all through distribution and that people can actually use it and present it properly. Then why you should care about a PE and what we can do. This is a slide that I use in classes I teach about packaging. It's only packaging. Anyone can do it. I had a boss once that said that to me, and I asked him what he had done for incoming, receiving, and making sure that they could be inspected right, make sure it could actually run on the production line properly, stack in the warehouse well, ship out for the minimum cost possible. And he went, huh?
Nice.
So it makes it sort of interesting, and he actually started getting a little more involved in packaging after that. A lot of people think product R&D can develop packaging. They are really good at developing a product, but not always what's going on later with the product. They might get a supplier to develop a package, and I always say with depending upon your supplier, it's one of those things is if you've only got a hammer to work with, everything looks like a nail. So you need to get multiple people involved or suppliers if you want to actually develop good packaging, but to make sure it actually fits on your production lines and works for shipping and distribution and in the warehouse, it's your suppliers are not going to know that. And there are a lot of standards and guidance documents out there on packaging that you have to be familiar with and make sure that you are following as well as possible because of actually there's a lot of laws that actually require standards or tell you you should be using them. You don't have to use them, but if you're not using the standards and guidance documents, they want to know why, what you're doing, how you validate it, and they get into the weeds a lot more if you're not using regular stuff that's already published. I always like to say that package engineering blends all these pieces together like a puzzle. Excuse me, I'm having a little bit of tear duct problem and I've been trying to get it cleared up, but it doesn't want to, so my eye waters. These are some of the
Allergic to
things we
pollen?
look at. Excuse me?
Are you allergic to pollen? I see you're sitting in a garden.
That's my background. That's my backyard, and it's native plants, and they're not very they don't produce a lot of pollen to cause problems.
Good.
So we get into all of these different pieces and making sure tolerance stack up. You minimize your cost because sometimes it's actually cheaper to buy an expensive package because it causes less problems farther on the line in production or shipping than it is to buy the cheapest thing you could possibly find out there. That's why you usually develop some kind of work with your purchasing people to make sure they actually understand what's happening instead of just trying to get the cheapest things possible.
Jan, this may be just 101, but define a package.
A package holds something. So this is a package, if you can see it through my background, because it holds something. Now, I wouldn't use this because it's too heavy and it could break too easily, but for some products that might be necessary. I would prefer to go with some paperboard because it's much more potentially recyclable and you can do things with it. But you've got to make sure that you're holding your product in there so it won't go all over the place. This particular one, which I'm having trouble opening it now, is set up so it is a one piece, so it's easy to set up and work through. So with a medical device, it's the package is actually part of the product, the package that it's touching. I can't get this one. Oh, there it is. So it works well. Almost everything is packaged. Clothing is packaging for people. So there's a lot of actual textile stuff that we have to learn too. Now, I wouldn't call that packaging. I would call that a product, but then whatever you've got to put that clothes in to get it from one place to another is a package. This one I like because it's all one
Maybe lose
piece.
if you're going to continue with the samples of things, maybe lose the background for a little while. We can.
Well, I'll won't do much more, but it's a package just holds something. And then we want that package that's holding something to be able to ship it somewhere else. So you might have to have another package around it to hold it. Depends upon what the product is. So almost your picture frame is a package for your picture.
Okay.
So there's a lot of different things that packaging can be. It's not just one thing, which is what's fun because depending upon what you are producing, it's necessary to use different materials to get it from one place to another. I had somebody tell me once when I was in vitro diagnostics that the package wasn't important. And I said, well, you've got a liquid product. Tell me how you're going to get it somewhere without a package. So it makes it interesting. At one point in time, I had a professor at school say that if we could have better packaging for food, there wouldn't be any starvation going on in the planet because most food rots before it actually gets distributed because it can't be packaged properly.
Mhm.
So it gets into a lot of different things. With medical devices, getting back to that, and some pharmaceutical, we have to know about these Code of Federal Regulations and the different pieces in here. They're very general, which is why there's a whole bunch of guidance documents out that give you a little more specifics on it. And then for some reason, if you're using any metal, the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act specifies that you have to use non-conflict metals, which is part of packaging in a lot of products. So you get to find out a lot about regulations. And I'm talking about guidance documents too. There's over 4,000 of them. So you need to be able to sort out what's necessary for use. Plus there's consensus standards that lets you know what the FDA is thinking about as applicable. And these are good links so that you can look them up and see. If you use a standard that's not on the consensus standard with the FDA, they want you to do a lot of work proving that it's an acceptable thing to be using. When you get into basic package engineering, You've got material tests that you have to work on, and those are a list of some of the ones you have to do. Incoming receiving requirements. I've had problems where people are doing incoming receiving and they're using calipers to measure corrugated boxes. It's got to be a ruler, and then teaching them how to measure it. It gets interesting when you have to get through all those pieces and make sure that you're measuring the same as the supplier, so you don't reject things that are actually good for you. And sometimes some of the measurements are just there for information so the supplier can make the package consistently, but it's not a critical component or measurement that's necessary to keep the product safe. So you've got to be able to sort all those out. Yes, these are actually, these top ones here are actually specified in the CFRs to make sure that you are doing it properly so the package system works for you. Then we also get into storage before use. Well, that's part of the FDA requirements. You've got production, how it's used on the production floor. I came up with a wonderful package once, but it was causing carpal tunnel for my online people, so we had to change it.
Can you hear my dog snoring?
No.
Michelle asks, what are your thoughts on voluntary?
Voluntary what? Standards? Voluntary.
Yes, but here she comes, I think. Michelle.
Hey, Jan.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Oh, better than some days.
Today's a good day for a good day.
Yes.
So when you said there's like, thousands over, I think you said 4,000 voluntary standards, I have customers all the time tell me, Michelle, that's voluntary, it's optional. You just tell the FDA it's a guidance document and we're going to do this other thing. Without being able to prove that this other thing that they did is as good as or better than the guidance document. So what do you see like people treating, how do you see people treating these voluntary packaging standards and FDA's reaction
you can
or enforcement?
As far as enforcement is, if you don't have proof, more backup proof for a non-voluntary standard, you're going to get called out and they'll send it back saying you need to do more work and prove that it's an acceptable standard or whatever it is, guidance document to be using. If you use one of these, you still have to justify, but that can only be a couple sentences on why you think this is working rather than 200 pages of testing and documentation on why this is a better standard than what's considered good by the FDA. Does that
Yes, that's perfect.
answer your question? Yep. That's why it's good to know about these things, because most of them are set up so you can use almost all of it as long as you specify you're only using this portion, and then you can tweak it for what you're doing and have a little less background work for the whole system.
Right. Yep. No, I've seen the exact same thing in biocompatibility with all the changes. It was things that used to be voluntary, and then people just kept pushing back and not doing it and not properly justifying. And then, so the FDA said, fine, it's a requirement now.
Yep, and they do that, and that's why Europe is going from the medical device directives to the medical device regulations, because not enough people were following the voluntary standards.
Exactly. Almost everything that's in the MDR existed in some way before in one of these voluntary standards or guidance documents.
Yeah, when 11607, which is packaging for terminally sterilized medical devices, when the -1 and -2 came out, they became a requirement. But I'll never forget the regulatory person where I was working read the original 11607 and said the new ones weren't that different. I said, I agree, but we weren't following the old one. So it makes it a little bit, you've just got to know where you can do it. That's why I like being on standards committees, and I recommend anyone get on them as possible, because you can find out the background of why they did what they did and how you can tweak it better for what you might need, which is fun to do. Anyway, we went through some of these basic things. A lot of this is learned in school. Some of it you learn by the hard knocks when you get out to work too. That's how I learned AQL sampling can be difficult sometimes. Other regulatory requirements that you have to know about are all these. I keep putting in human factors because that's a big push by the FDA and Europe right now, is making sure you get all those done. I have a question here. Love,
Sorry, I
oh
missed it.
yeah. I would love to see risk assessment of leaving packaging development until after product development by product R&D group. I'm
Kinda
not
had
sure.
added to it. Go ahead, Rick. On mute.
Okay, the background on this is that with some of my clients, I can see that an interaction between packaging choices and design choices is going to be a dynamic thing that needs to enter in fairly early in the project. Because packaging costs and availability are going to determine design decisions and vice versa. So with that in mind, is there some kind of risk assessment or summary, sort of a outline that I could build on when I find it necessary to make the case to a customer who is maybe not very informed on packaging, like an FMEA, on
Yeah,
the risk of leaving packaging out until after we design it, then we'll go find a packaging.
oh, actually, no, but that's part of what we are working on in that new medical device packaging handbook for the packaging engineers. It's been so proprietary because the people that actually get this for the packaging can actually put it on the market faster with less damage and less problems. So most companies keep it as proprietary. And I'm hoping we're supposed to get some risk assessments put into this book on general things you have to worry about with packaging first. And the new sustainability documents or packaging and the environment documents out of Europe pointedly says that you have to develop the smallest product possible for packaging so you can use the least amount of packaging possible, or prove why you didn't.
And that's something
Those,
that wouldn't occur necessarily to anyone in the design phase, other than smaller is usually better.
yeah, usually, but not always, because
Yeah.
sometimes it's necessary to use something bigger than what you would think is necessary, mainly for cost factors or working in with your production lines. I mean, that's the reason you get those pill bottles with 5 pills in them, because they can't run a smaller pill bottle on the production line and get the accurate count that they need. So it's got to be a bigger bottle that they put more pills in for other reasons, but sometimes you only need 5 for a
Yeah.
sample.
No, I understand. When I was in process engineering many years ago, I was the guy who developed a design FMEA and sent it to the design guys, explaining to them how their decisions could impact manufacturing. And I see the same thing needed in packaging, to where you can say, well, here are the kinds of packaging choices that we have, and that itself would influence the fact. They'd say, well, I figured it would just be a box, or I figured it would just be sterile pack, or or something like that, or bubble wrap, or what have you, and that would give them the idea that, man, the choices that we make are going to really influence how we have to design the product, as much as design of the product is going to influence packaging. And if I had somebody on a project where I could say, hey, we're reaching this, we want to decide to go with this way or this way, what are the packaging implications for that? And there's some products are just like, you could throw them against the wall, it would be okay. So you just sort of have to put them in something and send them. But a lot of products are not like that. And you also have to consider things like, what is it going to be like when they have to be opened? Are they going to have to open them, the inner packaging, with gloves on? And do I need to make sure there are no sharp edges and things like that, or tabs or anything, or adhesives? And I've been in this situation where they'll just tear your gloves right off. There's so many packaging considerations. And the more complicated the product, and the more sterile the environment, and the more fragile the product, the more I would want to make a good, effective case to my client for, we need to bring in a packaging engineer. So we have somebody on tap, NDA'd and informed about the project, that we can call from time to time. They can bill us for their time, and it'll be money well spent. But that's what I'm trying to, those are the kind of things that I try and build for those things that people consider ancillary, until they realize that the right packaging is just as important as having the right product.
We need to get you two working together on a project. Thank you, Rick.
Yes, and when I would love to develop something like that for people. Right now, I do that for a lot of people. They just call me in to help them out in the beginning and then pay me for my time and go on with things. I'll never forget a company coming to me once, and they had a product that was 68 inches long. And I looked at it, I said, well, how are you going to sterilize this? Are you going to irradiate it? They said, no, we're going to ETO it. And I said, but pallets are only 48 by 40. And they told me they wanted it laying flat. I said, this has to be stood up on end. And what you're talking about right now, the center of gravity is so high, I can't stack it up like that. And they said, no, got to be down. I said, you will not find a sterilizer that will do something with an overhang on a pallet like that. So they had to develop that product so it was smaller to fit on a pallet. And it makes it fun. That's part of what you go through with some of these regulatory requirements and human factor testing to make sure the gloves don't get ripped off. They are sending company submissions back if they haven't done human factors with the FDA. I think Michelle has had some experience with that. Here's some other things that we work on. There are equipment packaging engineers. I have a few that actually work on purchasing, installing, and doing the IQs on equipment. I get involved with the material and the operational OQs and PQs and what kind of requalifications you need. I get into preventative maintenance with spare parts because I have found sometimes you will validate a piece of equipment that has consumable parts, and then the mechanics don't know any better and they go and order any old thing out of a catalog and then wonder why the packaging isn't any good anymore or working well. There's people that are specializing in UDI, which is sort of an offshoot of serialization for pharmaceutical products. And I know for myself, I know how to make sure the mark stays there, but I don't get involved with the actual submissions and tracking data on that. But there's people that spend their whole life doing that and love it. With a sterile barrier system, packaging engineer, and that's what you have to call the primary package with the product in it. That is the terminology that is necessary for medical devices now, because they consider the sterile barrier that's around the product, they consider that all the product. It's something that you have to worry about. And there is no product without the package. So I'm talking about here, I talked about the packaging as part of the final product. There are additional requirements where you have to do aging for your package stability. You have to go into typical worst case rationales so that you actually test that to make sure if something odd happens, maybe your warehouse has UV lights that'll affect the packaging and change the color. I've had that happen. Or it gets really hot up high and cool down below. Does that do anything? So there's a lot of different things you have to look at and test to make sure that it all works. 11607 is the Bible for packaging of terminally sterilized medical devices. It's the first standard out there that actually deals with everything. And when you make a process that works well for 11607 and make sure that the packaging system works properly through all the different aspects of it, it's actually very useful for other things besides sterile medical devices. You just got to drop out the sterilization part. There are other groups that make standards. I've listed a few here. TAPI is for paper. MHI is Material Handling Institute. They have they have a really good labeling one right now, but they also get involved with the barcodes and how you put them on and have standards for it. And there's other ones that are useful. How does logistics get into the packaging? I had to sit down with a supplier once where we were looking at their product. It was a kitted product, so a combination product. They were making this in 3 different countries and sterilizing in another country and then shipping part of it to the US and part of it out to other countries. And I'm looking at this going, not only do you have to worry about the final kitting, which is down here at the end, but you've got bulk packaging and other things you need to check out to make sure that this is actually going to work properly. And that packaging up ahead of the final kit, by the regulations, you only have to test the final kit. But if you test it there only and there's a problem, you don't know where it happened in that whole system. So we try and make sure we look at all of it and see where the work needs to be done. I always like this mapping distribution. This particular case had a subassembly that came from another country that came into the final packaging situation. Can you see my arrow pointing here?
Yes.
Okay, this is the way the distribution's working in the US. It comes around and it's actually seeing all this handling, airplanes, stacking up, putting in a truck and coming around to where it's actually given to a hospital for them to work. In this particular case, they were doing multiple shipments. They would ship 2 out and have 1 come back. So the one that came back would go up through this system again. I'm went the wrong way. Customer came around here. This would go up and through this system again with all the people handling it and stacking it and coming back up to be put into packing for shipping again. So it was on a warehouse shelf. Then it was shipped out again. So if it's in the US, you still have these things happening to the product and it comes around. If it's out of the US, it was actually sent through this system twice before it came up and around here. And if you think of flexible packaging that is a sterile barrier is going to survive multiple trips like this, you haven't looked at it carefully enough. And then if you do want to make sure your packaging works, what kind of tests do you have to do? Because there is nothing out there right now as a standard that actually goes through all of this multiple times. Shipping is usually considered one time, one shipment, and then it comes around. So it makes it, it's just something you have to look at and make sure you understand. Because we have environmental things. You've got tarmacs where they sit out on the shelf and it's pretty hot. Trucks get hot, cars get hot. You've got different drops that you have to worry about, and how you mix it all up and make sure you do a test that's proper is part of what a package engineering person does. Here's some things you have to worry about if you're shipping in a single parcel system or you've got a warehouse that doesn't know how to read. So then you got warehouse damage from fork trucks. This one is hard to see on the bottom, but this is actually a distribution site and they have things coming down and it goes into this chute that comes through and it's supposed to drop into the bag. And sometimes it overshoots the bag and goes elsewhere. This is not an unusual site in a big warehouse facility. I've actually looked at different countries and found they're all handling single parcel about the same. When you get into human factors, we have to think about the entire product cycle. I got this slide from someone that was doing a wonderful talk on human factors where somebody didn't understand that when you started sharpening the pencil down, you got a different message going on. So why care about a packaging engineer? They're part of a product development team. They write specifications, they understand standards and regulations. They can pick the right material to protect it from the environment that it needs to be in. Could be just alcohol wipes can do some interesting things to printing on packaging. So it develops all these things and you can work through what some of these are. And when you get it all set up and a good system in place, it actually helps consolidate your packaging. I was in one company once where we went from 25 different cartons and things that we made into kits down to 4 because we got them to use the similar packaging all the way through, and I could get what used to be 40 some different thermoform bases. I got it into 5. It would fit into these packages. We went from 60 labels down to 5 sizes. And they used to have 60 different sizes. So it helps you when you can consolidate and make sure that it's all working properly through there. Anyway, that's what I have. Hopefully that makes some sense. I like my little packaging guy. Is there another question somebody had?
Bring Larry on, and I suspect we won't need your slides, so go ahead and kill those.
Oops, wrong one. Stop share. There you go.
Larry.
Larry, you're on mute.
Larry.
It's terrible for me to be on mute. I can tell you right there. No, it's interesting. It's what you don't know that surprises you. And watching what you present, it all feels very logical that these are important concerns. But I know that I was in the industry for many years, not for the last 20 years, but prior to 2000, when I went back to FDA, I spent 18 years in the industry, and the packaging was always part of the R&D group responsibility, and it seemed to work. In other words, the question I wanted to know, where were these guys? Because these R&D guys, they obviously didn't have a lot of skills in packaging. Do the packaging suppliers, if I need a box, if I have a package I need it, and I go to a packaging supplier, a big one, and I say I'm making this device and I need to get packaging for it. Do they have packaging engineers working at that company that would then look at your product and talk to you about the various considerations and essentially assist you to assure that they sell you the right package? I just didn't know if that service existed there.
It's where I was talking about. If you only have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So there are some companies, some of the medical device suppliers of packaging materials are starting to get more packaging engineers in there to help. There's a couple of companies that are actually buying pouch and card and carton companies and know how to get to where you need to go to a corrugated company to get some other things, and they're doing it and they're trying hard, but they will tell you need to check your shipping system. So then you need another set of people that will come in and look at your shipping system to evaluate what you need for sampling and testing there.
Right.
So yeah, they exist, but they're out to make more money for their company, not to save money for you.
And there's a real value in your presentation, because the old adage is you don't know what you don't know. And after watching you, I realized there's a whole lot that I didn't know about the intricacies of packaging engineering. And that puts me, and also when I work with my clients, it allows me to tell them certain things that they need to be conscious of and consider. And thank you for your presentation.
Good. I was hoping people would find it interesting, because I know a lot of people just don't realize that kind of stuff.
Andre?
Yeah, actually, to put a point on that, Jan, is that, when we take on a project from somebody that wants us to develop a medical device, part of our design input document actually has a section for packaging requirements, packaging design inputs. But what I commented is the fact that invariably 9 times out of 10, our clients just don't want to talk about it. They just do not want to go over the package. They want us to just talk about whatever electronics or whatever the device is going to do. And we sometimes really have to push and prod. And, we maintain all the standards here, and I've got mechanical engineers, not packaging engineers, but the mechanical engineers that will design the carrier package and then the shipper's package and so forth. But we clients just don't even want to pay for us to do that kind of work. It's frustrating.
Yeah, it can be very frustrating. I have a design document that I use for coming into a company to ask about things. And even just asking them, well, how many do you think you'll sell in a year? I don't really care. I just need to have an idea, because you get a lot different price break and people interested. I need different suppliers. If you're only going to make 100 in a year versus 200,000, it's a different set of suppliers and things we have to worry about, and they get really frustrated with those kinds of questions.
Yeah, no, it really should be thought of when the product is being designed, because even the design of the product can be influenced on the way that it's going to be shipped, with IATA rules, or if it's going to be shipped in multi-packs or single packs, could affect how you design it. And in our case, the electronics can actually be affected by what exposure it's going to have in its packaging and its shipping.
Yeah, you've got static electricity and magnetism that's going to really get you, that we have to figure out how to shield or not shield, or
Exactly right.
how to set it. You get into, when you get into e-beam, a lot more people are getting into e-beam sterilization. You have to worry about shadowing. So if you have something coming at you, you can't have your system set up so they're like that, and the beam's coming at you. You've got to figure out how to twist it, and you got to make sure the packaging is set up right to allow the sterilization process to happen.
Yep.
So there's a lot of different little pieces while we're trying to make sure you can actually open that package and use it properly.
Right.
Makes it fun. Is there any more questions on things? I have to say, I do have one claim to fame. I invented microwave popcorn.
Yes. Mark
When I was
wants to
working.
know if you have worked with smart labeling, RFID, or similar technologies.
I've done a little bit of that work, but that's there are other people that are much more expert at that than I am. I can get into where the what some of the things you have to worry about, but as far as the different wavelength channels, how are you going to read it? I've actually, there are specifications and stuff which are luckily laid out easily so you can follow those, and I've used them, but I'm not an expert in that. If that.
Before you go, Rick, my buddy Dave is on the line, and he writes, I found a packaging brief, much like a product brief, works well to get required information upfront and to simplify the process. So I think that's a quick yes from you.
Yes.
Rick?
One thing and again, I'm looking for ways to present this to my clients, but I work with clients on cost reduction, and a lot of times you can just take cost right out of a product. And one thing they don't think about is working with temporarily a more expensive packaging to keep them from having to make their product completely indestructible. And then as time goes on, we can further engineer the packaging and reduce the cost of the product that way. But a lot of times people have the idea that the only way to reduce the cost of the overall product is to buy cheaper materials or to cut corners. And I've taken thousands out of a product all the time using more expensive, more advanced plastics, which cost more per pound, and cause them to reduce the number of steps to make the product and expand that into packaging. And you start looking at, well, you can do this and this and this with the product, but if you have a package that will stabilize it, you can actually work over time to cost reduce the cost of that packaging by doing experiments and finding out what can transport it, maintain integrity, and use more advanced methods to stabilize a product during shipping and handling and unpacking.
Yes. Even on the production line, I sometimes find a more expensive package, up front, there's less incoming receiving issues, there's less waste on the production line, as well as getting it into something where you can ship it and it works better. So you actually, even though you paid more up front, it costs you less in the long run. And trying to get a company, because a lot, especially if they're big companies, they silo different departments.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to get in that silo to make them look across the company and see how their actions affecting other people's actions.
That's why I'm interested in seeing, if somebody has got some charting on it, as a process engineer, the way I got them to change designs was to actually put it in the format that they use to evaluate their designs. And then when they saw it, they had two choices. They could either improve the design to take care of process issues, and the same thing with packaging. They could invest in the packaging to take care of design issues, or they could live with the fact that forever documented was an improvement that they decided wasn't important. So when I would put something in a design FMEA format, and I was only a process engineer, those designs got done because they realized there it was documented that, I wasn't trying to hold it over them, but sometimes you have to make choices really obvious. And I'm looking for ways to do that in packaging engineering too. Even though I'm over on the design side, I realize that we're related.
Oh yeah, very. Yeah. I've always enjoyed working with design people that realize they don't know the engineering part well enough. I mean, when we were doing Wesson oil bottles, we had to shoot a shot of nitrogen up into the capper to make sure the angle was right that would shoot down into the bottle, because we pressurized the bottle and kept the headspace full of nitrogen so the oil wouldn't saponify or oxidize. But the way the design person had made this grip ring, they call it, on top of the bottle, the nitrogen couldn't shoot up. So we had to work on fixing that grip ring location and size and angle so that we could get the nitrogen to actually shoot into the bottle properly. So yeah,
Elizabeth offers to have more movie nights with her daughter if you get royalties for microwave popcorn.
I do not. They gave me $10 and a thank you very much. Then
Yeah.
moved me on to plastic ketchup bottles, and I got
But
promoted
you
for the
also get
plastic
your
ketchup
royalties.
bottles, but I finally got into medical devices because they pay you better.
Macha, you had a question.
Sure. Could you comment on the cost implications sort of on the packaging industry as a result of the pandemic? And then kind of are you seeing more of a trend towards outsourcing the whole packaging process as a whole, or are companies trying to keep it internal?
I'm seeing more people outsource it and more companies set up for doing that. There has always been some companies that have specialized in what we call co-packing, OEM or whatever, but I do see more of that happening. There was a lot more plastic use, which is putting a strain on the system and getting more people to look at how you're going to recycle it. That's the biggest thing with plastics. They've been a wonderful thing for medical devices and a lot of food packaging and everything, but we don't recycle or have a way of recycling it very well right now.
And then I guess along those lines, so if you think about the amount of vaccines that are going out and sort of this whole global distribution of COVID related items, has that created any kind of shortage in either packaging materials or supplies across the board, or has that not really had an impact at all?
The main problem was the vials that they put the vaccines in. You have to order that a year in advance to get it. So people were buying that up or losing the ability to actually have vials, glass vials to put it in. The distribution became a problem. We've always been able to distribute that type of temperature for the vaccine, but the system wasn't very big to do it. So they ran into a capacity issue of being able to ship things cold. So they were doing all sorts of things trying to get that up and running, but glass vials and the shipping capacity were the main things that I saw where they had troubles. And it affected other companies just trying to do things. I'm just doing it in general. I had a couple of major medical device companies I worked on that didn't have products that were related to the pandemic. They had products that extended people's lives or helped them feel better, but all surgery stopped. So they didn't have any products that were being sold. So there was a lot of people dying from that too, just because they couldn't get into the hospital or the material they needed wasn't available. I don't know if that's helpful, but
it's just interesting. It's something that I was thinking about.
This, I think it was just this last week on last week tonight with John Oliver. He did a piece on recycling. Did you happen to see it?
Yes, I did, and it really bummed me out. But he's right, and the manufacturer take back, which he was pushing, is already happening in Europe, and California is looking at it. But I don't know if other places are in the United States. We have.
What does that mean?
That means that when you are selling a product, the packaging that holds that product, you have to take back or pay another group to take it as trash for you. And they hope by you building up all your empty packaging that usually you wouldn't be able to use anywhere, will convince you to learn how to recycle it better as a manufacturer.
Yeah, I think he said that only 9% of that which is recycled, even if it has the recycling icon on it, actually gets
recycled. Right. That's why the way the symbol is supposed to be used on plastic materials, you're not supposed to have the arrows because people think that means you can recycle it. It
Mm.
doesn't mean that. It's just there so if somebody is recycling, they know where to put the material for use.
Yeah, and I mean, even someone, I try to be conscious about it, but I can't remember 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 what these things are and which one, you know, I'm always like,
There's an
honey, does this
ASTM
go in
standard
the,
on that.
yeah, I think the answer is number 1 and number 2, yes, pretty much, and the rest, forget about it.
Yeah, they're working on it. And part of that you can help with your own use at home. I try and buy things made with recycled materials as much as possible. The whole deck I put out is half plastic with
Mhm.
wood chips in it. So you can try and use it in your own use at home to help with that recycling to get the demand up there more.
Thank you for doing this today. I've invited you to speak a couple of times now, both at the live conference, which I helped to reinstate back in 2022, and a couple times here. You're definitely my go-to for packaging. And I think the main message today is, you know, just as there are software engineers, mechanical engineers, biomedical engineers, the packaging engineer is an oft forgotten, like, do I really need that? I mean, how many packages do I need to have a full-time, you know, you may or may not need a full-time person, but you do need someone who does this for testing and the like, and making sure that that's part of your.
That you look through it all.
So we know someone, her name is Jan Gates, and she's here to help. Thank you, Jan, very much. I enjoyed this as always, and I wish everyone a great weekend. See you next week. Bye, everyone.